Okay, so you would have just answered the question, is it right or fair to reap the benefits of a successful society but not contribute to it? And this may be a little bit difficult to think about. Some of these questions I know probably catch you off guard and make you think about things in a way you hadn't before. So it's okay to come back and sometimes say, I just don't know, or I can't think of anything. But a good example of this would be companies that operate in the United States. Their employees are American, their customer base is American, and they are reaping the benefits of operating within an American society, such as they have their fire services, their police departments, all that kind of stuff, right? But they are not actually paying their taxes to America. Perhaps they have relocated, they've sent their companies off-site to an offshore location, Ireland, Bahamas, whatever. There's lots of different tax havens in the world, and they are funneling their money in that way to save the money from being sent to the American tax system. That's not right. It's not fair, because they are getting all the benefits of operating in America without contributing to it. And when we get into, in a couple weeks, we're going to talk about paying taxes as a corporate social responsibility. So we're going to talk some more about that then. But that's just something to kind of keep in the mind to be thinking about. So businesses are expected to be good, and this may even mean just portraying ethical values and acting socially responsible without actually being socially responsible. So for example, if you've ever picked up a bottle of Coke or Pepsi or whatever, most of the time you're going to see the little recycling triangle on there, the 3 arrows in a triangle, and usually it will just say, please recycle. That's called greenwashing. When you look at something like that, if you're not really paying attention, you might think, wow, isn't that great? The company is promoting being responsible, they're promoting recycling, they are, or you may even mistake it and think that the product is made of recycled material. None of that's true. All they're just saying is, hey, please recycle. So they portray ethical values. They're acting responsible. You look at that and think, isn't that wonderful? Aren't they great? But they haven't actually done anything. All they've done is just stuck something on the side of their advertising on their bottle. So you get the impression that they're good without them actually having to be good. Ethics is concerned with the values and what a group of people consider to be right or wrong, right? So different groups, different cultural areas may have different ethics. So what one group, what one culture may consider to be ethical, another may not. For example, Muslims and Jewish individuals don't eat pigs. They don't eat bacon, they don't eat ham, because they consider that to be a dirty animal, unclean, and they don't consume it. I personally think bacon is one of the greatest things to eat in the whole wide world. It's one of my favorites. I talk about it a lot. My students actually brought me a t-shirt that said, I love bacon. Okay, so it's a big deal. I love it. I couldn't imagine not having it. But I would be considered engaging in unethical behavior if I were in a community in which they did not consume pigs. Another example is clothing. Within America, we have lots of different culture groups. We have Amish, Mennonites, that we can look at them, and we can, in most cases, we can just tell what their religious preferences are based upon how they're dressed. Right, so even within the American overall culture, we have smaller subcultures, and they consider just how you dress to be ethical or unethical, right? Their group has determined that. There's no law saying that this is right or wrong. You go to jail for not wearing a skirt or something, but they consider it to be ethical, right? So if you are a manager, you are needing to conform to these rules of society. If you're in charge of an organization, a board of trustees, whatever, you need to understand what that community, that group of people, that society that you're operating in considers to be ethical or unethical. And if you don't know that, you can really have some pretty major faux pas and get yourself in some trouble. And you haven't read this article yet. It's going to be the next one you read, Pava, but he talks about the fact that no code of laws can articulate a set of rules which entirely exhaust ethical responsibilities. So as managers, we are expected to go beyond the letter of the law. Don't just recycle paper. Recycle paper and aluminum and glass, or whatever. Don't just do the bare minimum. If you're going to engage in society, if you're going to participate, do it and go beyond the letter of law. Engage in the spirit and what people expect. Go beyond. All right. So then, if ethics are determined by a society, is being unethical the same as being antisocial? Well, yes, in a sense it is, because again, the society determines what the ethics are. Again, this is not laws, this is just kind of behavioral expectations. So if the society expects you to behave a certain way and you don't, you are being unethical. If the society expects you to engage in corporate social responsibility and you don't, you're being unethical. So some examples of unethical actions that benefit society. Because you can be unethical and benefit society, right? It goes both ways. And in 1978, Reverend Leon Sullivan, he was a member of the General Motors board, and he created something called the Sullivan Principles. And at that time, General Motors was the largest employer of indigenous black Africans in South Africa. And at that point, if you guys have ever heard of apartheid, it was similar to the segregation that we experienced here in the South in the early to mid 20th century, but on a much grander scale. All right, so we would have had water fountains that would have said whites only, or bathrooms that would have said whites only, blacks only, that kind of stuff, or restaurant sections, or how you could sit on the bus. All these horrible things that we did to this group of people, but it was on a much greater scale in South Africa. So it wasn't just where they could drink or where they could go to the bathroom. It was you can't live outside of this area. You can only work here. You can't marry. It was actual laws in place to prevent an entire group of people from participating fully in society. So General Motors, again, at the time was the largest employer of the indigenous black population in South Africa, came along and said, this isn't right, we don't agree with this, and we are going to actually set up some principles that if you want us to continue operating in South Africa, you're going to have to conform to these principles, and if you don't, we're going to pull out. And General Motors, along with I think 125 other American companies, all signed these Sullivan Principles. And it is not the reason that South Africa eventually was able to come out of that, but it was a driving force. I mean, they were really wanting those companies to stay there. And if you see the quote down there at the bottom from Reverend Sullivan, he said that companies must practice corporate civil disobedience against the laws. So in this case, General Motors was actually being unethical. They were being antisocial, because in order for them to treat this group of people fairly, they had to go against what that society said was ethical and what that society said was okay. So corporate social responsibility can be an example of ethical behavior. General Motors, as a company, wanted to do what was the right thing to do, their social responsibility, what they felt they needed to do. And that was an example of being ethical within South Africa. So not engaging in corporate social responsibility can also be considered unethical if your community expects it. So for example, in certain parts of Colorado is the first one that comes to mind, in Washington State especially, and in California too, they really push recycling and taking care of the environment and watching out for that kind of stuff. And so if it is expected for you to recycle and you don't recycle, then you are being unethical. Corporate social responsibility can be about these things, but it doesn't have to be. A lot of people want to engage in corporate social responsibility because it's the right thing to do. It helps a certain group of people. It helps a charity, whatever your reasons for getting into it. But there's also a group of people that say, well, no, we're going to do this from a purely economic or strategic standpoint. So, for example, I am going to engage in the community and donate to charity and help out with charitable events, maybe sponsor a 5K or whatever for cerebral palsies, because it makes our company look good, because it might draw customers to us and it brings us positive public relation attention. That's great, but you're engaging in corporate social responsibility entirely from a what kind of profit can I get from this? And some people might say, well, that's wrong or that's not right, but in the end, doesn't matter, because the end result is the same. This group, the social responsibility has been engaged in. A group of people, a society, whatever, has benefited from this responsibility, even if it was engaged in from a purely can we make money type of perspective. Like ethics or good manners, social responsibility can be free. So if your mother ever told you growing up, and my mom did, that good manners are free, well, that's the example of corporate social responsibility, right? So this was a picture I took from my own phone the last time we went to Disney and stayed on site at the resort. And in the back of the door, as you're walking out, there's this green check. And when you first look at it, it's kind of gives you the idea that they're trying to promote recycling and taking care of the environment, because it's called the green check, right? So green gets your attention, makes you think earth type stuff. It's asking you to cut off the lights, make sure your TV's turned off, set the thermostat back. Are you going to reuse your towels? Make sure the patio doors are closed so you're not wasting the air conditioning, right? And this looks great, but if you really think about it, this is just Disney asking you to save them some money. When you're on vacation, you're not paying attention to this kind of stuff. You don't care if you leave your air conditioning set to 62 degrees the whole time you're inside Disney World. When you come back 14 hours later, you don't care, right? You're on vacation. But Disney is trying to save as much money as they can. So they are using this taking care of the environment perspective to get you to save them money. Does it matter in the end? No. Because in the end, if less electricity is used, less resources are consumed, that's a societal benefit. It's a good thing. Regardless of whether Disney has saved money on it or expended money on it, the end product is the same. So I didn't ask you to read this article, but the DeCole and Ganella 2002 article, they have a really interesting perspective which kind of helps you wrap everything up and tie it together. And they propose that ethics is the internal operationalization of an organization's values, and social responsibility is the external operationalization of the organization's values. So that just means the way I treat my employees, the way I operate my business, the way I handle promotions or terminations, any of that kind of stuff, right? If I'm ethical, that is things that are done inside the company, right? And when I take those same values and I reflect them outside the company, into society, into the neighborhood, into the local school systems, whatever, when I do that, that is a social responsibility because I've taken those ethics and I have reflected them outside within the community. So I hope that helps you tie it together and helps you understand the relationship and the difference between ethics and social responsibility.